Tobias Kremer first for 5 minutes.
Pan poseł jest nieobecny, w związku z tym głos zabierze.
It seems Mr. Kramer's not in the chamber, and so I'll give the floor to the rapporteur, Luciana Annunziata, for 4 minutes.
Pan poseł Tobias.
Tobias, you have the floor.
Colleagues, 2026 is barely 2 months old. And yet even in these few weeks, Europe has already been caught off guard several times. First, we were helpless bystanders during Donald Trump's attack on Venezuela. Then we were caught off guard by America's threats to annex Greenland. At the same time, we continue to be kept out of the loop during the so-called peace negotiations between Russia, Ukraine and the US. And now on Iran, we appear once again to be without leverage as Trump's war continues to escalate across the region. Colleagues, these conflicts are directly affecting the prosperity and the safety of our citizens. So why has Europe, the world's second largest economy, not been able to bring its weight to bear here? Why are decisions being made about Europe without Europe? Part of the answer is our own cumbersome decision-making process and the vetocracy that is abused by people like Viktor Orban that I can only hope will come to an end soon. But I fear that there's also a deeper, a more structural reason. Namely that whether we like it or not, we now live in a world where our ability to deter our enemies, to defend ourselves, and to back up our ambitions with capabilities matter. But it is precisely in this domain of hard power that Europe continues to punch below its weight. And why? Not because we don't have the potential. We have the economic muscles, we have the engineers, we have the ideas. But when it comes to defence, we have for too long forgone the power of European integration. We have kept it out of the single market, and we have instead allowed for fragmentation, for weakness, and for dependency. And today we are paying the price for this. We are paying the price politically, when we are not at the negotiating table but on the menu. We are paying the price militarily, when it's not just Ukraine but our own soldiers who are waiting for equipment that arrives too little and too late. And we are paying the price financially, when we are paying up to 30% too high prices at times when families in Europe are struggling to make ends meet. Colleagues, this is unacceptable, and it is unworthy of our great continent. Europe deserves better. And that is exactly what this initiative report seeks to deliver. It presents a coherent and ambitious roadmap towards a genuine European single market of defence. And it does so in 5 very concrete steps. First, we commit to making the bi-European approach the new standard in defence procurement. Because European taxpayer money should primarily strengthen European industry, create European jobs, and build European capabilities. Second, we call for a thorough revision of the procurement directive. We want to tailor it to today's defence realities and rapid innovation cycles, because our rules must enable and not hinder joint projects and technological leadership. Third, we need mutual recognition of certifications and security clearance, as well as finally the removal of all other necessary barriers to inter-EU transfers, because, colleagues, it's simply absurd if a civilian lorry can easily cross borders, but the same lorry painted in camouflage and used by our troops cannot. And fourth, we propose a dedicated joint funding device for innovative technologies, because Europe's best ideas need to be able to scale up and to deliver real capabilities, but they need to be able to do so without making themselves dependent on non-European investors. And fifth and finally, we call for a comprehensive EU-NATO cooperation agreement, one that allows common norms and NATO standards to be effectively integrated and, yes, enforced by EU law. Because honestly, what's even the point of having common standards if we cannot properly enforce them? If several European countries proudly coordinate to make sure they are sending the same sort of tanks or artillery to Ukraine, only then to notice that one country's model often cannot even properly use the ammunition of another country's system of the same type. Colleagues, fragmentation is inefficient. It is expensive. But on today's battlefield, we see that can even be deadly. Colleagues, this is exactly why this initiative report and a genuine European common market of defence are so urgently needed today. And our objective here is simple: to build a competitive European defence ecosystem where every euro invested delivers maximum innovation, maximum security and maximum value for money. Colleagues, in this new world order of great power politics, Europe has a choice. We can cling to old habits, keep out defence of the single market, remain fragmented and continue to pay more for less while others shape our future. Or we can act, recognise our strengths, unleash the power of the single market and turn Europe's economic power into real security and strategic autonomy. For that, we need a single market of defence and we need it now. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle. Głos zabierze sprawozdawca.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the rapporteur, Ms. Lucia Antonata, for 4 minutes.
Colleague, Commissaire Kubilius, Madam Chair, months ago, when we began to talk about Europe's strategic autonomy, it seemed to many an exaggeration or even a sign of abandoning diplomatic option. Today, several months after the discussion began, we find ourselves facing a new conflict in the Middle East after the one in Ukraine, leaving proof that Europe is exposed to risk of attack that now are taking new forms and for which we are not yet prepared. War has changed, in fact, its soul. Conflict today presents an entirely new phase and entirely new threats. These new wars are increasingly technologically driven and increasingly unmanned. New technologies are transforming strategies, leading toward the miniaturization and decentralization of systems, as drones, AI-enabled weapons, smart mines, portable missile systems are proving. Even the role of human power is changing. The future is moving toward weapons that require minimal direct human involvement. How can we defend our citizens, our sovereignty, and our democratic system in a security environment that is changing so rapidly? This is the question we have tried to answer in this report by interviewing many experts, NATO officials, military personnel, think tank, and national representatives. To begin with, we are convinced that defence must be brought back to its true meaning, which is not a metaphor for rearmament. The right to safety and protection is a constitutional right of all European citizens and one of the pillars of state sovereignty. Our task, therefore, is not simply to increase military spending, but to ensure that Europe can genuinely protect its citizens through a collective effort and a shared strategy. Many have assumed for a long time that an European army would simply be the sum of a total national armed force. But states remain sovereign, as it should be, in the management of their army. So we have worked precisely on this challenge, identifying the key capability gaps and exploring how Europe can address them collectively. In our view, the most effective path is to develop the technological dimension altogether. It is the most feasible step. Technologies are already there. Yet, no single state has a decisive advantage, and no single state can invest sufficiently on its own. What Europe can do rapidly and shared by all member states is to strengthen the development of technologies in order to create a common architecture, an integrated system of command, control, communication, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, capable of enabling Europe forces to act together efficiently and coherently, creating joint operation among all states and with NATO. Finally, We have included two key recommendations in this report. First, we believe that the principle of Buy European should play a central role in future procurement strategies. Second, the European Parliament, we think, must play an essential role in this development. We cannot risk leaving the issue of defence outside effective oversight and democratic control. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję. W imieniu Komisji głos zabierze pan.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Andrius Kubilius has the floor.
Madam President, honourable members, thank you first of all for these two very important reports. I thank the rapporteurs and the shadows for your excellent work. First, Mr. Kramer, thanks for initiative to break down barriers on our EU defence market. We have a unique European internal market of 27 member states, 450 million people, GDP 18 trillion euro, one of the biggest markets in the world. But our defence market is fragmented, splintered, divided. Fragmentation is bad for our defence, bad for our competitiveness, stops us from winning the global race to produce at scale and on time. Without a common defence market, industry focuses on export markets. Fragmentation and small scale of industries causes governments to buy defence products outside of Europe. We spend around 50% of our defence and taxpayers' money on the creation of good jobs somewhere else, not in Europe. Why is that? Why is our defence market and defence industry so much fragmented? Because, as you know, our treaties define that defence is a national prerogative, and for years, member states built their defence industry nationally. That is why fragmentation is a legacy of our historical experience. That is why it is not so easy to overcome. You are right to mention the treaty article on the security derogation from single market rules, Article 346 from Treaty on Functioning of the European Union. At the moment, it is invoked too often, and that is blocking European cooperation. The consequences of that, national barriers and national protectionism, different licenses, different requirements and different standards. Fragmentation stops us from developing joint defence projects. Fragmentation prevents us from standardising production. It is why we are producing hundreds of different types of weapon systems when the USA has only 30. It is why our weapon systems lack interoperability. And still, our governments like to procure alone. Even so, joint procurement brings bigger and longer-term contracts, and in this way cuts the prices. The European defence market is a big market, which means big demand, big investments and big production. That is why our debate on a more integrated European market in defence is not a theoretical debate, it's a very practical challenge. If we overcome fragmentation, defence industry can be the most important driver of competitiveness, not only for defence, but for the whole European economy. Letta and Draghi were very outspoken about that. While developing our defence capabilities with new funds and new procurement of new weapons, we need also to do everything to overcome fragmentation of our defence market, to strengthen defence industry and its ability to scale up production. And that is why we must also concentrate our efforts on creating a more integrated European market in defence with strengthened security of supply. This summer we will present a strategy for European defence market. We are also revising the Defence Procurement Directive, and we need to find a way to incentivise member states to less often use the security derogation of TFEU Article 346. Also, we need to continue to lend the benefits of joint procurement and of joint development of pan-European defence projects, of flagship projects as we call them. And that brings me to the second important issue you raised. Mrs. Annunziata, I welcome your report on defence flagships. Pan-European defence projects that no member state can build alone, but that defend the whole of Europe. Projects that demand the leadership of member states, but also funding and support at EU level. Until now, we had a very limited experience of success in developing such joint pan-European projects, much less than in the development of pan-European space projects. That is why the Commission proposed 4 flagships in our Defence Readiness Roadmap last October: the European Drone Defence Initiative, the Eastern Flank Watch, the European Air Shield and the European Space Shield. Member States are discussing potential others as well on the Mediterranean and naval challenges. You are right to call for autonomous strategic enablers as a flagship project, since we are heavily dependent on American strategic enablers. I am glad that you also stress the benefits of these flagships for competitiveness. I would add, also for increasing interoperability and for learning how to defend Europe together. Flagships are moving forward with European Union support, with money, safe loans, and also by cutting red tape. And with, as you mentioned, the revolutionary new legal instruments in Egypt, the structure of European armament programmes, CEAP, and the European defence projects of common interest, EDPCIs. The Cypriot presidency is now moving forward on these common defence projects. We have issued a call for expression of interest for EDPCIs. Member States are discussing them and have until 16 March to notify their interest, next Monday. We expect concrete project proposals by the end of the summer. That is how, step by step, we are learning how to become more united in defence. So thanks again for these two important reports that truly complement each other. Our analysis of problems and solutions is very similar. I am glad you both include Ukraine, and your reports are also important as a message to Europe. We must unite for our defence. Thanks a lot.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie komisarzu, w imieniu Komisji Rynku.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. Now, on behalf of the IMCO Committee, I give the floor to Madam Tramacere for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. I'd like to thank Mr. Maran for having followed this file. This is my maiden speech in this chamber, and of course it's a very difficult time for Europe. We can see at the borders of Europe that war is not a long way away. It's a reality, and the events in the Middle East are extremely dramatic, while Ukraine is still fighting to defend our values and our security as well. And in the face of this, Europe cannot be allowed to be divided. We need to look at the 13 billion that's going to defence in the EU, because a lot of it's being wasted, and we need to look at these flagship European defence projects, which are absolutely essential for a genuine defence market, to defend our GNI and also to strengthen European governance. Obviously, the member states on their own will not be sufficient. We need to have a common defence rather than a fragmented one. And this European defence cannot remain an idea, it has to become reality. Thank you.
Pani poseł w imieniu Komisji Rynku Wewnętrznego i Ochrony.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Ms. Gavich for the IMCO Committee.
Europe is facing the truth right now. Our citizens have been very clear about this. They want security. They want a strong Europe that is capable of defending them. And we have 27 defence markets right now instead of having one single European one. Today, European armies use 18 different types of tanks, whereas in the US they only have one type. In the EU they have only 6 types of jet fighter pilots. We have many more in the EU. We'd spend more than we have to, and our military equipment is incompatible with that of other member states. In Poland, we understand very well the importance of security. We already invest 5% of our GDP in defence, and we want to strengthen the work of NATO, but we don't want to do this alone, and we cannot do this in an isolated way. The war in Ukraine has shown us that the rate of production is very important. If we don't produce more for our armies, then we won't be able to make progress. We need to remove obstacles in the market. The European defence industry needs to get rid of red tape. It needs chains of command and a single defence market, because the most important thing is the citizens, the security of the citizens of Europe and the future of Europe.
Chrześcijańscy demokraci, głos zabierze pan poseł.
For the EPP, Mr. Terras has the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. The European Union's ability to contribute to the defence and security of its member states depends on how we are able to prioritise to use our funds from the common purse. Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine shows very clearly that technological development on the battlefield is no longer a matter of years or even months. New technological solutions are being introduced in weeks and days. It is absolutely necessary to tackle the slow innovation cycle in the European Union by closely linking research and development with production, and we also need a close cooperation with Ukraine. Drone warfare, which has become the new standard of the battlefield, requires rapid and innovative solutions. I am convinced that the drone defence initiative is most appropriate to implement through the pilot projects, essentially in the member states bordering aggressor, Russia and Belarus. I would also like to emphasise the role of the SMEs in this context. They are often the ones that drive the innovation with their mobility and flexibility. They should definitely be kept in the loop. Thank you very much.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle, w imieniu Grupy Postępowego Sojuszu.
Thank you. For the Socialists and Democrats, I give the floor to Mr. Yannis Maniatis for 1 minute.
Dear Commissioner, one of the most important messages was the solidarity of European states to Cyprus, which is faced with the results of the attack from the United States and Israel against Iran. Today we are submitting a roadmap for the defense market. The integration of this market is a prerequisite for the development of defense industry in all member states. Finally, as the defense industry is becoming an important pillar of European defense autonomy, we should make sure that European-made weapons should not be found to threaten a member state. Thank you.
Patrioci za Europą głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you on behalf of the Patriots. Ms. Tierney for 2 minutes.
Monsieur le Commissaire,
Commissioner, rapporteurs, colleagues, strengthening defence in Europe, given our potential enemies and reducing dependency on external actors, are goals that we all believe in this Parliament. It's the means by which we get there is something we're debating. So we need to think about the logic of this, but we need to consider the finality as well. Respecting sovereignty is crucial, but we also believe that this perhaps is not the best way of strengthening our security. According to the report, the main cause of there not being strategic autonomy is in the selfish reflexes of states and this leads to a lack of integration. We reject this idea. According to us, the weakness of Europe comes from an absence of investment in defence for many years now, for ideological reasons, thinking of a post-historic world, but also because of a certainty of being part of a transatlantic community which is solid and trustworthy. We've seen the limits of this and the failure of this dogma and of the single market as well. Everything that we've done has hindered the emergence of champions. And we cannot reproduce this path when it comes to defence. The Europe that we have now doesn't need a single market. It needs political will that comes together to organise defence in Europe. We therefore prioritise the philosophy that comes across in this report. We will support this. We prioritise cooperation in key sectors in order to fill these dependency gaps. And we've seen many examples of this over the years. This is how Europe will be better defended in the future. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle, w imieniu Grupy Europejskiej.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the ECR Group, Mr. Dvořák for 2 minutes.
Szanowne koleżanki i koledzy, kolejna w tej kadencji.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. yet another debate on defence. That just confirms what Poland has been saying for a long time. The Russian Federation was never a partner for Europe. Our reservations and about aggressive behaviour have been ignored time and time again, and now we can see the error of your ways. These are policies which for years have defended Russian imperial industrial interests. Now we're seeing this multiplication of national ideas. What about Nord Stream as well? This, I think, is a test that, unfortunately, the European Union has not passed. We have to strengthen defence in the EU, there's no doubt about that. But the Commission's direction that they're proposing for us to take is unacceptable. We know that we can feel pressure of competences to be transferred from national level to EU level, and that applies to security and defence as well, unfortunately. And the idea behind it is this single market, but we don't think that defence is an industrial sector, and the idea of applying this single market rules to a sensitive sector like this is dangerous, and it brings with it a risk that the big armaments industries are being supported here. Other ideas for the defence industry, well, we could look at certain partners being shut out of this. NATO shouldn't be shut out. We shouldn't repeat failures we have committed with Russia. Because of security, we cannot accept that. We can't accept that Germany and France, as the dominant powers, have different visions than the rest of us. We have to see solidarity. We need to see strong support for the eastern flank, who are monitoring and guarding the eastern border. That needs to be dealt with and appreciated better. There needs to be balance as well in the EU programmes.
Thank you. On behalf of Renew, Mr. Everglue, 1 minute. Madam Vice President, Commissioner Kubilius, 2 trillion euros. Up to that much. That's how much debt we can get into if we don't achieve an internal market for defence. That's what we've learned from a Commission report. We will need to get into more debt. We'll have to pay more interest if we can't put together a competitive internal market. We do need defence. We need the best defence to protect our people. What we don't need is in the Commission, Parliament or the Member States who are not represented, and we don't need anyone to be allowing those billions of euros to be going into the pockets of various people. We don't need that. So, Commissioner Kubilius, so I say to Council is saying we need defence now, we need security now. Mr. Kubilius, we're talking here about 2 trillion euros. So, astronomical sum that we're talking about. We need you to defend it. Thank you. On behalf of the Greens, Mr. Marcinstakis for 1 minute.
Thank you, dear colleagues. In the report, we have included one important section, movement towards unified standards in the EU defence industry. And thank you, Tobias, for the excellent cooperation. But let's be frank, the report itself will not be of much use until the Commission develops the necessary legislation. We know that the industry by itself will not arrive at an agreement. Each company has its own standards, its own technologies, its own commercial secrets, and this is all very understandable, but we have seen that standards can work. For example, when we implemented the USB-C charger standard, we adopted the legislation and the standard worked. And this is the same thing that needs to be done in the defense industry, because for soldiers at the front, they don't care what the brand of the drone is as long as it works and gets the results. We cannot delay during war. Any delay is paid for in blood. So I would like to ask you to develop this regulation as soon as possible.
On behalf of the Left Group, Mr. Botenga has the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. In order to justify the hundreds of millions of public money that we send to multinational companies, weapons companies, we say that we have to protect Europe that's under threat. Even Ms. von der Leyen said that this was important because we are no longer the leaders of the previous world order. There's a new world order. And so we have to be ready to project our power. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean going out there and bombing other countries? In other words, there's this policy of non-interference is over. Us defending ourselves will also allow us to attack. We no longer want to be submissive in the world. We are going to align ourselves with those who violate international laws and who kill children, who occupy Palestine illegally, those who are attacking Syria and Libya. We collaborate with those who kill in Congo and in Sudan, in Latin America. We also co-signed the kidnapping of a leader who was in power. If we act this way, then how are others going to act? Why are they going to respect rules that we ourselves aren't respecting? If we want to guarantee the security of our citizens, we have to change our foreign policy and we have to stop waging war all over the world.
Panie pośle, w imieniu grupy Europa Suwerennych Narodów.
Thank you. On behalf of the ESN group, Mr. Neuhoff, 1.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes.
Meine Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union loves crises because crises are a fantastic means to push through extraordinary political measures. Certain characteristics of this: existential threat, the climate, Corona, the Russians. Secondly, time is pressing. We have to act now. Thirdly, a lack of alternatives. Fourthly, the character of the measures themselves. Stronger state intervention, new laws, mutualised debt processes, and above all, the centralisation of political power. The EU has dealt with all crises since 2008 to push forward union power: the financial and banking crisis, the European debt crisis, the migration crisis, the climate apocalypse, and the corona crisis. The Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 was a very favourable opportunity to unleash the next crisis, the one in defence. Under the banner of European security, we are preparing the next great step for integration: an internal market for armaments, common procurement, closer and closer cooperation across borders. We're being told this is pragmatic efficiency measures, as technical necessary measures, as a rational step. But in truth, it's about something very, very different. It's about a political project. Because as soon as defence industries and procurement structures and military planning are interwoven at European level, then dependencies are generated which are inextricable. Integration will not be decided on in political terms. It will be forced in a structural manner. In other words, we're using an alleged situation of a threat to get the member states to work closer and closer together in an irrevocable way. Ladies and gentlemen, the alternative for Germany wants to see strategic autonomy in Europe. We welcome that goal. The military competences and capabilities is a fundamental decision. It's not a crisis project. The planned measures for the establishment of an internal market for defence is something that the ESN group will not support. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Helder Sousa Silva, 1.5 minutes.
Senhora Presidente,
President, Commissioner, colleagues, war has returned to our continent and to our neighbourhood. And we see now, very late in the day, that supply chains are extremely vulnerable, and external dependence really pose a risk for our security. Faced with this fact, one thing has become clear. We cannot continue with a market for defence that is fragmented, where 27 member states develop, produce and purchase in isolation, often duplicating capabilities and wasting resources. The report that we're discussing today has understood this diagnosis. The objective is very simple. We need to identify and remove administrative barriers and regulations that still prevent Europe from really fulfilling its potential for its industrial technological base. But the report also makes one point very clear. Strengthening the European defence market is not about taking powers away from the member states. If Europe wants to shoulder more responsibility for its own security, it will need a defence industry that is stronger, more integrated and more competitive. Despite the importance of national interests, we must understand that on our own we cannot defend our interests. So let us then defend European interests as well. Thank you.
Bardzo panie pośle, głos zabierze pan poseł Sven Mikser. 1 minuta.
Colleagues, Commissioner, for years we have spoken about strategic autonomy as an aspiration. In today's world, autonomy is no longer a choice, it's a requirement for survival. As these two reports make clear, we must move from the era of strategizing into an era of delivery. The fragmented nature of our defense spending remains a vulnerability. We cannot continue to rely extensively on external suppliers for our defense acquisitions. It's not just a matter of economics, it's about operational independence. If we fail to build a genuine single market for defense, we are going to subsidize the industrial base of our competitors while leaving our own supply chains exposed. By strengthening our production capacity and supply chains, the EU can improve its strategic autonomy, improve competitiveness, and ensure that defense spending delivers stronger collective security. I also welcome the focus on flagship projects. The EU must close the gaps in strategic enablers from integrated air and missile defense to cyber domain. We need to pool resources, close capability gaps and strengthen our defense industrial base. These large-scale pan-European projects must also deliver to smaller companies from smaller countries like my own home country, Estonia. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo panie pośle. Głos zabierze pan poseł Georgi Hilveni.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hilveni has the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, colleagues. What is Europe's strategic direction? Is it about peacekeeping in this report? It doesn't just talk about obstacles when it comes to defense, it goes further. We believe now that Ukraine is part of Europe's defense, but we can't force that integration. We can't go against the interests of the European citizens. This defense strategy is not something they want. It's a part of a strategy, but it creates dependence. We want peace as well. That's one of the main conditions for European competitiveness, an environment of peace. The objectives of the defense sector shouldn't focus on finance or funding external players. But at the moment we are dependent on them, and we don't want to pass on a debt to future generations because of defense. So we want defense, but we don't want to finance war.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wieland, 1 minute.
And in Europe have finally decided to take defense seriously. It is encouraging that some now recognize what many of us have said for years. The main threat to Europe comes from the east, from Russia. However, strengthening European defence readiness cannot mean isolationism. European security is built on the transatlantic alliance. NATO remains the cornerstone of our collective defence. Hence, we must avoid duplication at all costs. The United States continues to be the key guarantor of security on our continent. Therefore, instead of endlessly debating the single market for defence, we should focus on what truly matters: real military readiness, strengthening industrial capacity and ensuring that our armed forces have the equipment they need. At the same time, let us not forget that national security remains the sole responsibility of Member States, as guaranteed by the treaties. Europe needs capabilities, not more bureaucracy.
Dziękuję panie pośle. Głos zabierze pani poseł Nathalie Loiseau.
Thank you very much. Nathalie Loiseau for Renew. We see that we need to increase our expenditure in defence and increase autonomy, yet we seem to be looking for any possible excuse not to meet our objectives. In the Middle East, we're seeing people using resources, and here in Europe, we're defending preference for Europe. We see purchasing is not coordinated, it's all too complicated, the procedures, and yet people think all is well and that we should stick to the status quo and stand in the way of a defence market. China invests massively in defence equipment and in new generation fighter jets at the same time when we're seeing rivalries between France and Germany endangering decision-making. It's enough to despair. Fortunately, we're seeing some initiatives now on nuclear deterrence that will help to improve and meet the expectations of other European nations. And it seems to be welcomed by almost everyone, except for those who want a weak and unarmed Europe. Let's not listen to them.
Bardzo pani poseł. Głos zabierze pani poseł Hanna Neumann.
Thank you very much. Hanna Neumann for 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, everyone says Europe needs to become more independent in defence, and I agree. For years now, we have been putting forward concrete ideas at the European level on how to get there, like these reports that show, for example, how flagship projects can strengthen European security. By building a European drone defence, by reinforcing the eastern border, by developing European air defence capabilities, all these are good proposals. And at a time when Trump is firing more missiles in the Middle East than he has delivered to Ukraine, flirting once again with Russian oil and threatening to throw Ukraine under the bus, Europe must move forward together. Many times in this House, we have set the direction only to be faced with hesitation from Member States or ignorance, as their absence today shows. So if capitals continue to say that Europe does not deliver, let me be clear, we do. You only need to walk your talk. And please, hurry up.
Bardzo dziękuję pani poseł. Głos zabierze pani poseł Marina Mezir. 1 minuta.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. In the last week, we've seen how the Middle East has been overtaken by bombing. The risk is huge, and Cyprus has now been targeted, so the war is at our doorstep. But we need to look at the text we have in front of us today. This pioneering project, the single market, makes 36 references to NATO. This is an organisation that doesn't defend our interests but does dictate our submissiveness. So how can we de-escalate when we are faced with America, which is feeding into a conflict? The EU cannot just stand by. It has to build a way of defending itself against imperialism and Washington. When we talk about defence, we also make a clear political choice. We need to think about the market logics and private interests, because war is lucrative, and while that is still the case, peace will be an illusion. So we cannot serve private interests, we have to be courageous enough to not align with the US.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown.
I want my country to be independent. That is why I will never support any projects of defence common market, because I already know from the Commissioner what this common market is going to look like. It's going to be our money paid for Western business to arm Ukraine. I'm Polish. I cannot accept spending my compatriots' money for arming people who entertain the tradition of genocide. They have just opened a school in Lvov, previously Poland, a school named after Bandera, who was responsible for Ukrainian genocide of Polish civilians. So this is a very bad prognostic, and that is why I cannot support your program. And may I add one sentence? For me, a Pole, it is funny to listen to my German colleague, Social Democrat, who expresses his sorrow because camouflage-painted lorries cannot cross borders.
Czas się skończył, panie
pośle. This is really funny. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pan poseł Nicola.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Pascual de la Parte for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. We have in front of us two reports that I think are indicating the right direction. We have to create a European single market on defence, which is better said than done. We have a lot of hesitations within Europe and a lot of enemies outside Europe against this European single market on defence. That demands a European industrial and technological base with a European preference in order to have the possibility to avoid duplications, to increase our efficiency, to transfer technology and to have standards that are common across the European Union. We also need, of course, the political will to go ahead, and for that purpose we have to support the small and medium-sized enterprises. They don't have the financial muscle, they don't have the capabilities to integrate themselves into the chains of production. We have to help them. We have to also to create perhaps an acceleration of innovation for defence in Europe. I think it's a good idea, and to incorporate and integrate as soon as possible Ukraine in our European security and defence structures. It is in our benefit more than in theirs. Courage. We will support you, Commissioner.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Royton for 1 minute.
For both reports, short-term national interests, no matter the origin, are holding back the establishment of a European defence, and nowhere more so than in the internal market for defence. Contrary to what some say here, this is an indispensable part of a genuine defence union. Of course, we want all countries of Europe to flourish, but hidden, covert protectionism is not the answer. Because of closed minds in the leadership of defence primes and old cultures in national ministries of defence, Europe's internal market for defence does not take off. These nationalistic approaches, abusing the concept of national security interest, cost European taxpayers tens of billions of euros. It weakens innovation and competition, forces us to buy American products and spend our money inefficiently, and it costs lives, as Kramer said. For Europe to do better, we need the synergies of a single defence market with unified innovation, development and procurement. We need real binding action to enforce this defence internal market. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Głos zabierze pan poseł Aleksander Vondra.
Thank you. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Vondra for 1 minute.
European security. Flagship defence projects of common interest are not just initiatives, they are strategic investments in our future. There are things no single member state can address alone. These projects must be interoperable, technologically advanced and coordinated with NATO. Russia aggression has shown the urgent need for coordinated response. We in the ECR strongly believe that defence readiness and investment in capabilities is essential. But we reject protectionism that will slow the things down. Speed is essential, and nations in the Eastern Front Line know this very well. Let me be clear. To strengthen European defence means to lose hands of industry. No war has ever been won by the regulation. The war in Ukraine clearly demonstrates that ingenuity and willingness to risk win the battle.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pani poseł Anna Maja Henriksson.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Henriksson has the floor for 1 minute.
Commissioner, we live in a dangerous world, and I think it's absolutely clear that Europe has to do more to ensure its own defence. The Russian threat has to be taken seriously, and in this chamber we have to realise that it will exist, that threat. Hence, we need a strong single market for defence. And the Commission is on the right path. We need to do more. We need to do more together. We have to bolster our small and medium-sized enterprises. We need to simplify procurement procedures, and we have to make sure that partnerships start to work seamlessly. That's how we generate possibilities to maximise our own security, to make sure that our citizens feel safe for a long time into the future. And we need to continue to support Ukraine and at the same time take advantage of the experience that we have seen there, for example, on drone defence and other aspects. So Ukraine's issue is ours.
Pani poseł, głos zabierze pan poseł Rainer van...
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Lanschot, you have 1 minute.
A German commander, a Belgian pilot and a Dutch engineer walk into a plane. No, this is not the start of a bad joke. It's what I saw last week at my visit to the Air Mobility Command in Eindhoven. This multinational corporation for transport and in-air refueling is great. It already works. But with EU leadership, it could work even better. That's why I included in this report on European defence projects of common interest. By buying big, complex systems like satellites together, we generate economies of scale and ensure taxpayers' money is used efficiently. To make sure they are also used effectively, we need to operate and maintain them in the entire life cycle at union level. And to create the systems of tomorrow, we need stronger EU synergies between research, innovation and industrial development. Commissioner, let's make it a reality, because the German, the Belgian and the Dutch I met are not a joke, they are a glimpse into Europe's future.
Dziękuję. Głos zabierze pani poseł Ruth.
Thank you very much. Ms. Firmenich, you have 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, if the European Commission were serious about peace, it would be doing everything to find diplomatic ways of ending wars in our neighbourhood. But it has done nothing. Not in Ukraine, not in Gaza, not in Iran, where now we're seeing the US and Israel's unprovoked illegal war of aggression raging. Instead, Ms. von der Leyen is dreaming of turning the European Union into military power and is even questioning international humanitarian law. Has she been lying for all these years when she was talking about international law? Or is it just applying to Russia? When we talk about this, we're often talking about support for USA and NATO, and it's unacceptable that we're seeing military bases such as Ramstein being made available for these wars. Well, let's take a leaf out of Spain's book, which denied access. Let us close US bases so that they can no longer misuse Europe for its wars.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Meo. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, President. If we really want to maintain our deterrent power and diplomatic power on the global stage, then we have to strengthen the single market for defence. However, the fragmentation in standards and regulations, the lack of standard approach, means that we slow down investments, we weaken our potential and our credibility. We need clear rules that favour action between member states that involve the industrial level as well, including SMEs, to reduce our dependence on other countries. We have to support the shared industrial power we have. Joint programmes need to be launched which bolster the presence of Europe in the transatlantic alliance. A more integrated defence market that's more competitive is not just a strategic choice for industry, but there has to be a military dimension to that as well. Now more than ever, there's a necessity to reinforce our strategic autonomy and guarantee the security of our citizens and our economy.
Dziękuję. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Heinaloma. You have 1 minute. The war of aggression against Ukraine waged by Russia has threatened Europe's security in a very serious way. At the same time, America's unpredictability has shown us that we can no longer depend on others to defend us. We therefore have to build our own credible defence capabilities. This is a shared responsibility for all member states, and it in particular affects the eastern border. The eastern flank is the first line of defence for all of Europe. Developing anti-drone capabilities and air defence mechanisms are an important step in that direction. Europe has the right conditions to move forward in this respect. We have a solid industrial base, good capabilities in this area, and above all, we have SMEs. We have to use their innovative capabilities and their strength together. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Teresh for 1 minute.
Decades of European appeasement towards Russia, from the 1992 war in Moldova to Georgia in 2008 and Ukraine in 2014, encouraged Putin to launch the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the largest war in Europe since the Second World War. To remain free, we must take our defence seriously. First, strategic defence flagship projects like the Drone Initiative, Eastern Flank Watch, Air and Space Shield are long overdue necessities. Europe must close capability gaps that have exposed our continent and ensure our eastern borders are protected. Second, we must dramatically improve military mobility. This means investing in modern roads, rails, bridges and ports, dual-use infrastructure that strengthen our economies and security. Third, war today extends beyond the battlefield. Russia wages constant cognitive attacks on Europe through disinformation, propaganda and reflexive control, shaping public opinion, influencing election and advancing policies that ultimately serve Russian interests. The radical proposal of the European Green Deal, which increase Europeans' dependence on Russian gas, is such an example. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pan poseł Nikola Minczew. Proszę.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minchev, and please, I would ask you to stick to the time allowed.
Dear colleagues, since Russia's invasion in Ukraine, Europe's security landscape has changed dramatically. And as recent developments in the Middle East remind us, the global security environment is changing every day. In this increasingly complex geopolitical context, Europe must accelerate defence cooperation and invest more in our collective security. Flagship projects of common European interest are a crucial step in that direction. They can help us build a genuine European single market for defence, one that strengthens our technological edge, boosts innovation and empowers our companies. By pooling resources and coordinating our efforts, we can reduce fragmentation, avoid duplication and deliver capabilities faster and at a lower cost. But ambition alone is not enough. These projects must move from paper to reality quickly and effectively, and they must be guided by real forward-looking capability needs. Defence investment should reinforce our strategic priorities, but it must also match the scale of the threats we face.
Only by acting together with ambition and unity, we can guarantee Europe's security and strategic sovereignty in the years to come. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Głos zabierze pan.
Thank you. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Kefalogiannis for 1 minute.
My dear colleagues, recent developments in the Eastern Mediterranean remind us of a simple truth. When a member state is under threat, then Europe is under threat. The security of Cyprus is a European matter. The assistance by European member states in the area, such as Greece and France, show that European solidarity reflects the very essence of Article 42, paragraph 7 of the Treaty of the European Union for solidarity. In areas of increased tension, Europe needs to provide real means to protect the states, people, and shipping. So, the centers for European defense are necessary. This is the foundation of a Europe that can defend itself. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Mendes, you have 1 minute. Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Faced with these threats and strategic issues, defence in Europe has to be stronger. And there are two things from my perspective. We need to remove those barriers which continue to fragment our defence market and also invest in common projects which will reinforce our capabilities. European industry is particularly fragmented. There are lots of administrative barriers, rules, and different national approaches that limit cooperation and increase costs. A single defence market would be more efficient, it would be more innovative and make better use of public resources. But, colleagues, removing barriers is not enough. Commissioner, we need European projects which are ambitious, which help us to develop common strategic capabilities. We need to strengthen our industrial and technological base by focusing on innovation, know-how, creating jobs, more cooperation, because we need to do better.
Thank
you very much. Now, Ms. Ja, for 1 minute.
Vážený komisár, máme dnes pred sebou dve správy.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. We're discussing two reports that speak in clear language. If Europe wants to defend itself, it's not enough for us to just spend more on defence. We need a genuine defence union, not 27 national systems, no fragmentation. We need to be acting as one. Funds for common defence should not be used like a cash dispenser for big business and oligarchs. Funds, we've seen cases that should teach us some lessons from Slovakia and other countries. So public funds should not be handed over to friends and businessmen. All public funds need to be shielded from corruption. The union's values are at stake.
Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, single defence market is a false promise because it gives up on our objectives. There are 6 priorities for our defence industry: concentration in industry, interstate actions, competitivity, more transfer within Europe, because a single market for defence is not going to achieve that because we don't have a free movement for armaments, and any free movement would affect the possibility of technology leakage and strict controls that need to be there. We need to make sure that controls are in place because we want to see strategic concentration, for example, Bromo, Leonardo, Thales and Airbus cooperating. Thirdly, looking at the Commission, when they have states which have armaments exports, that's part of their national strategy. If we have a qualified majority, it basically takes out the veto, and war may be at the door of Europe. That's not a good idea. We don't need a single market. We need an intergovernmental market on defence with an observation that the Commission should stay in its lane.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dinku for 1 minute.
Commissioner, colleagues, these reports are very important for the future of European security. They start from the following truth. We have a powerful defense industry, but it's fragmented. We have too many bureaucratic barriers and not enough real cooperation. These reports come up with concrete solutions, a single market, common procurement, safer procurement chains and common intent. Of course, the defense costs might drop by 30% if we are to increase investment in European capacities. But we also send a political message that's important. We need to change our strategy in Europe. We used to think that those who are closer to a potential risk should invest more, but this model does not work anymore. We are threatened not only from the east, but also in the cyberspace, and this strategy no longer protects anyone.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Taveri for 1 minute.
Defence project is good and lists many ways to improve our defence industry and defence capabilities. Among other things, the report stresses that Ukraine is a key part of Europe's defence architecture and that we should develop our defence and industrial cooperation with Ukraine. And that is very true. During the 4 years of war, constantly under fire, Ukraine has been able to increase its defence industrial output by 50 times, while the European defence industry has not been able to do even 1/10 of it. Ukraine is producing high-end counter-UAV systems and cruise missiles, and even when attacked constantly by Russia, Ukraine is capable to support Persian Gulf nations in countering Iran's UAV attacks. But only if there is funding at place. Ukraine can currently fund only part of its own defence needs, and only part of the industrial capability is used. So, the best and most cost-effective way to improve Europe's and EU's defence industry and defence capabilities is the famous Danish model. Let's invest on the Ukrainian defence industry so that it can produce more capable weapons and systems much cheaper and faster than our own industries can, while at the same time teaching our industry to do the same. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Dziękuję bardzo. Głos zabierze pani poseł Idoia Mendia. 1 minuta.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Mendia for 1 minute. Strategic autonomy is not built with speeches, but with specific decisions, and the time has come for the European Union to take a step forward. We cannot continue to talk about security and strategic autonomy while we have fragmented defence capabilities and we continue to depend on third countries. There will not be a stronger, secure or more prepared Europe to protect its citizens without a technological and industrial base that is its own. And therefore we have to focus on European preferences that strengthen European supply chains, that remove barriers within the Union, and that ensure that this effort benefits all member states and not just a few. But this effort also requires qualified workers, quality jobs, and a focus on training. We have to attract talent and ensure that a high-tech industry like this one can be developed strongly and generate positive effects on innovation and other civil industries. That is the pathway forward. We need less dependency, more coordination, more capabilities, more jobs and more Europe. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Sherpa.
To rok przyspieszenia. Mamy plan zbudowania gotowości
Well, it's the year of acceleration. We are building up the plan for defence readiness. We have common flagship projects. We have financing to try and fill the gaps where our defence capabilities were insufficient. Poland has led by example, and we can see that there's no minister for false alternatives, because every day is essential and we're facing further challenges. We need a military Schengen. The military has to be provided for in better ways. We need to have barriers brought down for freedom of movement, military mobility. Time is absolutely decisive there. Flights, roads, railways, bridges, etc. Transport corridors need to be in place. We need to make sure that this preparedness is there if the crisis comes, and logistics have to be guaranteed for European security. Thank you.
Kostas Mavrides, 1 minuta.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Mavridis for 1 minute.
Key founding father of EU stated, quote, "Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first created de facto solidarity." EU defence is the most important project for deepening EU over the last few decades. Fragmentation of defence industry is a problem. Political fragmentation, though, is a political mistake, geopolitical mistake. The last few years we've seen the war in Ukraine and now the war in Iran. We need to go beyond national armies. We need EU defence mechanisms to protect Europe. A regional EU defence permanent representation of EU forces in Cyprus is the first concrete step. If we keep silent once again about the recent transferring of Turkey's 6 air fighters to the occupied area of Cyprus, I'm going to say it very bluntly, Mr. Commissioner. We are feeding the monster. And keep this date. The new ruler, anti-European, the new Iran, would be Erdogan's Turkey.
Dziękuję. Głos zabierze pan poseł Jan Farski, 1 minuta.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Jan Farski for 1 minute.
Microphone for the speaker.
Again, I'm sorry, I had no microphone. Evropská unie vznikla jako mír.
The European Union was founded as a peace project. In defense, it relied on NATO, meaning USA, but Europe is not weak in itself. It is fragmented. Where USA can have 30 defense systems, Europe has 178. And simply speaking, for many countries, it is more important to support their local military industry rather than ensuring collective security. Not only are we not able to ensure our own defense, but we also waste money. Lack of coordination costs us up to 57 billion annually. We don't live in a safe world, and we don't have unlimited resources. We need to act. We need to cooperate. Investments in defense are also a big opportunity for entire Europe. If we invest smartly, we will strengthen European technologies, European infrastructure. These changes will last, but we can start immediately. We should have European West Point. We should have a good basis for European cooperation. One wise man said that Europe cannot defend itself, will become a prey. Let's start building the European pillar of NATO.
Zabierze pan poseł Bruno Gonçalves, 1 minuta.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Gonçalves for 1 minute. Commissioner, external policy is not something that we can be complacent about. We have to be more than just a figure in the wars, given that Donald Trump is threatening European wars, European lives. We need to be at the main table, not on the menu. We have to protect ourselves from the US, but this doesn't involve sovereignty. It's time to take charge of our collective defence with our defence market, and to go even further than that, we
it makes sense that we should now focus on. It doesn't make sense that we should be partnering with those on the other side of the Atlantic instead of people within the EU. This integration is more important. We need to fight against the law of force, and we need to share ambitions and a future despite our differences in the past. There are 450 million people in the EU, 27 member states, and we need to go further than we are at the moment.
Pan poseł Niels Fuglsang.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Niels Fuglsang for 1 minute.
Kære kommissær, ærede kollegaer, den internationale orden.
Commissioner, colleagues, the international order is undergoing changes and it's not going to improve. We have to wake up and see what's going on. We're still seeing wars with Russia in Ukraine, and we've seen this for more than 5 years. It's not just Ukraine that's being attacked. It's security for all of us that's at stake here. If we don't support Ukraine, we'd be naive to think that others will come in and help us out. We've seen very clearly no one's going to come. No one's going to heed the call. We need to invest in our own defense, but we need to do that in a smart way. The industry, the sector is fragmented in Europe. Different systems are being developed across Europe. There's no coordination. It's high time for us to coordinate things now so that defense can be strengthened. If we want to protect the Europe that we know today, there's no time to lose. We must act now.
Jedna minuta.
Thank you very much. Claire Fitas, the next speaker for 1 minute.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, for 3 years now, the Member States have been saying they're going to increase in an unprecedented fashion their military budgets. Now, the question remains, do these the security of Europe? Too much of this investment leaves Europe to finance material that's produced elsewhere. So let us see things clearly. If European taxpayers' money is mainly going to support non-European industry, then we are missing the objective of having European defence. And that's why we have to take on a European preference for defence market, technological development, but because it's only that form of autonomy that will allow us to defend ourselves and keep peace. We have to make sure that it's through its autonomy that it will show its true power.
Dziękuję, pani poseł. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Franqueira Rodrigues.
Senhora Presidente, Senhor Comissário.
President, Commissioner, we've got air bases, we've got bases, NATO bases right across Europe. We can't be a transit point. We need to defend our interests, we need to defend our peoples and our values. Europe isn't going to defend itself by purchasing 27 times the same equipment or giving way to blackmail from other partners. We need more internal cohesion, a stronger policy and stronger industry and harmonization. Joint purchasing, strategic training, right across the European Union. No, we cannot neglect these gaps that exist, and we cannot neglect our geography either. The Atlantic, the outermost regions, strategic places bring together the Union, they link up the Union, and they need more attention. Protecting the Atlantic is also about protecting Europe as a whole. Thank you.
Proszę państwa, rozpoczynamy procedurę.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the Catch the Eye procedure, and I would ask you to be brief. You have 1 minute each. I won't give everybody the floor, unfortunately, but the first speaker will be Juan Fernando López Aguilar.
De los muchos debates. Commissar, of the many things that have been discussed, this is the first that has sounded sensible from my point of view. developing European capabilities that are a deterrent as well cannot depend on 27 different budgets that are increased in an arbitrary way. It also cannot be based on this very vague commitment from von der Leyen about the amount that she was going to devote to investing in defence. We need to remove tariffs, remove barriers, and make strategic choices so that the investment makes sense in cybersecurity and high-tech mechanisms in very highly specialised jobs. Only in that way will we be able to really build a deterrent capability in Europe, which could be the starting point of a European power and a European army as well.
Thank you very much. Sebastian Tinkinen is next.
Dear President, European defence should be our most important topic by far. Having said that, we must ask ourselves, does pooling EU funds automatically create strength? No, it doesn't. The EU cannot fire our bullets or fly our jets, and it certainly should not try replicating NATO. We already have NATO, we don't need replicas. The EU can complement the defence efforts made by Member States, but we must not forget. A missile funded by EU co-financing will not deter an aggressor if the Member State lacks the means of deploying it. The EU can help stockpiling our anti-tank missiles, but the Member States must have enough shoulders to carry those missiles. Europe's defence is not merely a project, it is a responsibility, and that responsibility starts at home. Thank you.
Dziękuję, panie pośle. Głos zabierze.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jaume Acelodra.
Señor comisario.
Commissioner, Trump doesn't need to kidnap anyone in Europe as he did in Venezuela to govern, because we are obedient subjects. We give up our military bases, except for the Spanish one, so that they can be used to bomb a school with more than 100 children there in Iran. When NATO is defending interests, well, we know that the Secretary General of NATO made statements the very week that von der Leyen was declaring the end of a rule-based order. So finally the masks are beginning to fall. So thank you for being honest, but what's the point of being part of a club when being a member, a paying member, you're being told that if a country like Greenland's being attacked, you're not going to get backed up, and if it's Russia, then you're being identified as an opponent all of a sudden. So we must free ourselves from the US control, a narcissist in charge of interruption.
Thank you very much. João Oliveira is next. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, the militarisation and this aggressive and warmongering policies are the greatest threat that the European Union is seeing right now. And the reports that we're discussing today represent a very intense race towards all of that. When we are underplaying the consequences that all of this has for people. You've talked about a single defence market, but really you will be benefiting a multi-million-pound weapons industry. And you're not mentioning the hundreds of thousands of Europes that will leave the budget in the EU, which won't go towards supporting different European sectors, healthcare, education. You talk about common capabilities so that we can continue to control the military in Europe. You've talked about Ukraine, but all of this is just a way of creating an industry based on death.
Pan komisarz Andrius Kubilius, bardzo proszę.
Thank you. On behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Kubilius.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, well, first of all, thanks a lot for this very important debate. Second, let's not forget that if you want peace, prepare for the war. I think that everybody here wants peace. And second, we should remember why unity in defense is so important. The United States defense industry would not be stronger if they replaced their federal defense industry with 50 defense markets and industries on the level of each state. In Europe, fragmentation into 27 defense markets and 27 defense industries also does not bring strength to us. It only weakens us. We must be ambitious for our defense, on defragmentation, on scale, on speed. But if we want speed from industry side, we cannot allow ourselves to discuss and negotiate the defense simplification omnibus for almost a year, or water it down. If we are serious, we need to show an example of ambitious political speed and scale of our decisions. The Ukrainians are showing us an example of industrial speed and scale, and of the speed of political decisions, because they are at war and they are defending us. We are not at peace either, but by continuing traditional slow, peacetime decision-making, it looks like we are dreaming that peace in Europe is eternal. Such an attitude needs to be radically changed. I know Europe can count on you. And let's remember what Mario Draghi wrote 2 years ago. Defense industry lacks scale, and he warned us what will happen without scale. I quote, if EU member states were to ramp up defense spending significantly, what we are doing now, a supply crisis could occur with member states competing between each other. There is a real danger this will happen. If our industries will not scale up, we will not achieve defense readiness. Instead, we will waste both time and money with punishing prices, penny production and plodding procurement. Scale up comes only with defragmentation, with consolidation, with a more efficient European market in defense, essential for both competitiveness and defense readiness. I invite you all to support these two reports tomorrow. And again, I would like to thank those who prepared this report.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie komisarzu.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we'll give the floor back to the rapporteur, Thomas Kremer, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Andreas, and thank you for all of those who have really very clearly and pragmatically contributed to this report, because this report is beyond and should be beyond ideology. The first post-war president of the SPD in Germany once said that politics begins with the recognition of reality. Unfortunately, I think some in this House live in a parallel reality, whether it be a reality where it is just the EU or Europe is the source of all evil, or on the far right where it all goes under the tunes of Radio Moscow. We see very clearly the threats we are facing right now from Russia, but also from other actors. We need to be able to defend ourselves. And if you don't believe me, trust our citizens. 80% of European citizens are saying they want more defense common in Europe. Let's deliver. Let's do what they want. 80%, it's clear. If you don't believe us, believe them. And I'm very glad that we have Andreas Kubilius as a commissioner who listens to citizens and not to those on the far left and the far right who live in parallel universes. Thank you very much.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle. Głos zabierze.
Thank you very much. Now, the rapporteur, Lucia Annunziata.
2 minuty.
2 minutes.
Yes, I'll try to be shorter than 2 minutes. I just noticed one thing, that long time ago, when we started this debate and things looked a little better, you know, there was a very divisive mood in this plenary. Tonight, despite everything, Commissaire, I think we are getting there to discuss the technicalities, the means, the money, and the organization. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to our colleague, we have been working very hard on this report. Still, before I leave, I'm not part of any military experience. I'm a politician and a proud politician, because I think we are people who are intermediary with consensus of people. So one thing is missing in oral discussion, which also has proved to be, has developed very well, is developed very well. We still don't talk about how to get a popular consensus on this operation. If there is one thing that there are two things that Ukraine war has taught us. One, the modernization of war, and second, the fact that Ukraine has a more resilient people. That's why I continue to resist. And the real weakness of Putin is the fact that he has no people that goes because it's him, the head of Russia. So I think, as a politician, Mr. Commissar, I would like, besides thank you, think that we should address the issue of how we have to make the population talk about these things, because we need the consensus. After all, popular resilience is the most important weapon. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję pani poseł. Zamykam debatę.